Question number 8, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Corrections and asks, does she have confidence in the Chief Executive of the Department of Corrections? If so, why?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, as the State Services Commissioner said at the Law and Order Committee this morning, confidence will come from improvement in performance, and the magnitude of the task ahead of the Chief Executive means that confidence will take months, not days or weeks.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Does she consider, given that answer, that 9 prison escapes, 2 prison deaths and 2 prison assaults in the course of little over 2 months under her watch constitutes an improvement in performance of the Department of Corrections?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
No, the basis on which that member has asked the question is disputed.
Sandra Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Corrections, what other statements has she heard about the Department of Corrections?
The Honourable Judith
Speaker,
Collins.
I am advised that the Law and Order Committee this morning, the State Services Commissioner confirmed to committee members that the Department repeatedly warned the former Minister of Corrections, Phil Goff, that the probation service was struggling to cope with the number of offenders and of the risks associated with that. But his government chose to ignore those warnings.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker, to the Minister. Does she not agree that it is impossible to expect the public to have confidence in the Department of Corrections, given her and her government's continued failure to express confidence in the Department's Chief Executive?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
No, I don't agree with that.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Can the Minister explain why the following statements about the State Services Commission report into accountability at the Department of Corrections are contradictory? The first being her own statement when she claimed that Mr Matthews had been held accountable by the State Services Commissioner, Newstalk ZB 10 March, and the second from the Prime Minister when he claimed on TVNZ Breakfast on 16 March that the State Services Commissioner had not apportioned anybody responsible in his report.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, one word is accountable, the other is responsible. They're 2 different words. Get them right, Mr Cosgrove.
Order. Order. Rahui Katane.
My question is to the Minister and asks, is she aware that Arohata Women's Prison recorded the highest assault rate among small prisons, and given that some 58% of the female inmate population are Māori, what specific interventions will be undertaken to ensure Māori responses are instrumental in addressing the violence?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, I am concerned about assaults in prison and violence, and I look forward to working with Minister Sharples to provide Māori appropriate responses, because this government is focused on what works.
Rahui Katane.
Has the Minister been advised that Corrections Association President Bevan Hanlon has called prisons a powder keg, referring to an intolerable amount of violence, and how does she believe that contract management of prisons could address this seemingly rising tide of violence in prisons?
Honourable Judith
Speaker,
Collins.
Yes, I have heard that report, and Mr Hanlon has recently released a report which portrayed privately managed Port Phillip Prison in Melbourne as comparatively safer than New Zealand public prisons he visited when he was recently in New Zealand.
David Garrett.
Supplementary question to the Minister. Does her failure to express unequivocal confidence in the CEO of Corrections mean that she is not satisfied with the State Services Commissioner's report on the Auditor-General's report, which identifies numerous failings within the Department of Corrections?
The Honourable Judith
Speaker,
Collins.
No, it means that, as the State Services Commission report has noted, Mr Matthews is working very hard to bring corrections to a standard where I, as the Minister, and actually more importantly the public, can have full confidence, because this government cares about public safety.